I'm Rutas Medina Stark. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm a piano instructor and I also like exploring various elements of piano technique. The topic of today's discussion is various preparatory exercises for mastering Chopin Study Opus 10 number 9. Frédérik Chopin composed this study in 1829 when he was only 19 years old, still a student at the Warsaw Conservatory. It is a study for the left hand and it develops flexibility of wrists and fingers. It is interesting that the left hand part technique of the study is dominated by large intervals which requires some stretching of the hand. This technique was one of Chopin's many innovations in the modern piano technique. The right-hand part of the study has a beautiful, haunting melody, which is dominated by the two-note slurs. Like all of Chopin's study, this study presents technical challenges in combination with great musical substance. It is highly technical, yet poetically expressive. The study is written in nocturnal style, and in its character and also left-hand accompaniment technique has some similarities with Chopin's Nocturne Opus 9 number 1. There are quite many preparatory exercises and annotated editions that help mastering Chopin's studies. But I would like to share with you the ones that I find the most helpful for my piano students. So first I will introduce 4 sources to you, and then I will demonstrate several preparatory exercises from each source. First source: Alexander Michalovsky's preparatory exercises for Frédérik Chopin Etudes Opus 10. Alexander Michalovsky was a Polish pianist, pedagogue, and composer. He devoted his life to study, performance, and interpretation of Chopin's works. Besides being a brilliant pianist, he was also quite successful in teaching technical aspects to his students and interpreting technical aspects in works of Bach and also Chopin. He studied at the Leipzig Conservatory with Ignaz Moscheles, who had been a close friend of Chopin's and had a deep understanding of Chopin's works. Michalovsky was also a friend with Karol Mikuli, who had taken private lessons with Chopin himself. For nearly 30 years, Michalovsky taught at the Frédérik Chopin Music School of the Warsaw Music Society up until 1918. Among his students were such celebrated pianists as Wanda Landowska, Alexander Safronitsky, and also the great Russian pedagogue Heinrich Neuhaus took lessons from Alexander Michalovsky. Alexander Michalovsky suggests several interesting exercises for the left hand. Those exercises are helpful for developing flexibility of wrist and fingers and also helping with the wrist extension. And also some of them are good for practicing evenness of the 16th notes. Alexander Michalovsky uses the first measure of Chopin's study for his exercises. And this is the first measure that he uses. In the exercises from 1 through 4, he suggests holding down the third finger that will serve as a pivot. And then one can practice stretching of the hand between fingers 5 and 1 using various rhythmic patterns like this. So this is using quarter notes. Then we are using eighth notes. And then various rhythm patterns for the same motive. Or exercises that will help with evenness of 16th notes and are the following. Or even adding more repetition. Second source, Alfred Cortot's study edition of Chopin's 12 Studies, Opus 10. Alfred Cortot was a French pianist, conductor, and teacher. He was one of the most renowned classical musicians of the 20th century. He was especially renowned for his poetic insight into romantic piano works, and that also include works by Chopin. It is interesting that Cortot studied at the Paris Conservatory with Émile Decombe, who was a pupil of Chopin. And that is why I consider that Cortot's study edition is quite a valuable source for mastering Chopin's studies. Alfred Cortot emphasizes the poetic aspect of this beautiful study. Even though a left hand has some technical difficulties, Cortot considers that they can be solved with some very simple and few exercises. However, the biggest challenge lies into the right hand portamento melody that has to be played with expression and a poetic mood. Cortot offers several interesting exercises for developing the portamento movement. And he suggests playing a chromatic scale using just one finger at a time, but also using various dynamics like starting out softer and making crescendo, or vice versa, starting out louder and making diminuendo. So I will use the first finger, my thumb, for that chromatic scale. And also Cortot's suggestion is to press the finger like imprint into the key to practice the portamento movement. And now start louder and make a decrescendo, up going to the top. Cortot's suggestion is to play the chromatic scale with all fingers. So, for example, third finger as well, doing exactly the same thing that we just did. And then starting louder and making the crescendo. Also, a great idea that I like from Cortot's edition is to practice scales just using various fingering patterns. For example, he suggests to practice a scale playing only fingers 1 and 2, using fingers 1 and 2 like this. Then another combination, fingers 1 and 3 for a different scale. And then using fingers 1 and 4, 1 and 5, and so on. Those combinations are really endless, and you can also apply them for any and all keys, which will be, of course, more challenging for the black keys. Another of his finger combination suggestions is using 3 fingers when playing a scale. Just 1, 2, 3. And transposing that exercise in all keys. And then using only 4 fingers, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then only 5, which is really challenging because ideal goal is to use legato as much as possible. And so on. For difficult measures like measures 27 and 28, Cortot suggests an interesting way to practice the difficult passage, which is this. He suggests to practice it this way. And I find that exercise very helpful. Of course, you can look into Courtaulds' study edition and maybe find some other exercises that will be helpful for your students, but I find these the most helpful. Third source, reference to Heinrich Neuhaus' 8 Elements of Piano Technique. In his book, The Art of Piano Playing, the great Russian pianist and pedagogue Heinrich Neuhaus offers valuable ideas of how to practice various elements of piano technique. In my YouTube video about elements of piano technique, I discuss in great detail all 8 of these technical elements. I will refer to a few of them in my practical demonstration of preparatory exercises that will follow. Chopin uses octave technique in some sections of the study. Heinrich Neuhaus suggests to practice octaves the following way, and I'm referring to octaves in measures 25 through 28, this section. Neuhaus suggests to first practice 4th and 5th finger of the octave section, with thumb being placed at a distance of an octave, but actually not playing, this way. And then playing octaves just with thumb and 4th and 5th finger being placed in a distance of an octave without playing. I find this exercise quite helpful, especially for students with smaller hands. Fourth source, Leopold Godowski's 53 Studies on Etudes of Frédérik Chopin. These transcriptions are among the most well-known compositions by Godowski. Godowski himself refers to them as preparatory exercises, even though these are quite challenging and virtuosic transcriptions of Chopin's studies. Leopold Godowski was a Russian-born American pianist, composer, and teacher. He had a brilliant technique. He was born in Lithuania, which was part of Russian Empire at the time. After briefly studying at the Hochschule in Berlin, he emigrated to the United States and taught throughout many schools in the United States, and that also includes Chicago Conservatory. He was known for his theories concerning the application of weight and economy of motion within pianistic technique. These theories were further explored by some of his students, and that also includes the great Russian pianist that I mentioned before, Heinrich Neuhaus. Leopold Godowski has composed 3 arrangements for Chopin's study, Opus 10 No. 9. Of course, all 3 arrangements are quite challenging, especially first and second arrangement. But I think that the 3rd arrangement is quite more accessible to an average student, even for sight reading or going through it, maybe not for performing. The idea of this arrangement is that it is exclusively for the left hand, and the challenge is to play the melody and accompaniment at the same time. Godowski's arrangement also helps develop wrist flexibility and also preparing hand for larger leaps. I would like to play a small section of Godowski's arrangement number 18, 3rd version. Thank you for watching my video. I would love for you to share in the comment section what kind of preparatory exercises do you use for your students for mastering Chopin's studies. Please subscribe to my channel. Thanks again for watching.